This is a talk on neurodivergence and symptomatic hypermobility. It's aimed at parent carers from Brighton, Hove and also East Sussex. The talk is actually by an organisation called SEDS Connective. It's being hosted, however, by the Amaze NDP Family Training and Navigation Service. NDP stands for Neurodevelopmental Pathway, and it's a relatively new part of the Amaze offer. Very welcome and thank you for coming. My name's Siobhan. I've worked for Amaze for about 5 years. I was a SENDS advisor. I now work on the NDP team on the advice line. I'm joined today by Boo, who is going to be recording this session. Our guests from SEDS Connective are Jane Green, who is the chair of SEDS Connective, and Kelly Harris, who is a parent carer in SEDS Connective and runs a local support group in Brighton. Roughly what we're going to do today is Jane or Kelly will introduce themselves and the work of SEDS Connective. Then Kelly is going to talk about her own lived experience of the issues of hypermobility and neurodivergence. And then Jane is going to talk about the relationship between neurodivergence and symptomatic hypermobility. We'll have this question and answer session, and then we'll finish with some tips for parents. And then finally, very briefly, I will mention, I'll go over the Amaze services and other services that might be relevant to you. So I think it'll be over to SEDS Connective now. So I'm going to stop the share.
Thank you everyone for coming to hear what we have to say. I'm a trustee for SEDS Connective and I have lived experience myself. I'm a parent carer and I also run a local support group every month for people with symptomatic hypermobility conditions and neurodivergence here in Brighton and Hove. And so I will be talking about my own lived experience and my own parent carer experience for a few minutes. And then later on, my colleague Jane will be talking about research and education in this area and indeed her own lived experience as well. So Jane, shall I quickly hand over to you for this slide?
Sure, I'll just quickly say this is what we're going to do. The connection between neurodivergence seems utterly bizarre concerning symptomatic hypermobility. And just to say that there are a lot of key words being used. So we tend to use symptomatic hypermobility because there's so many different labels. And we are identifying neurodivergence here as autism, dyspraxia, ADHD and Tourette's due to the evidence base. And so this is basically a little bit, I've got students there, but for children, why is it relevant and why is it relevant for everybody else? Over to you, Kelly.
Okay, so a little bit about my story, which has been a very long road to diagnosis. And so when I was a child, I was considered bright and intellectually and artistically gifted, as many neurodivergent kids are, that tend not to get diagnosed early. But all the signs were there. I tiptoed constantly as a child. I had selective mutism, which was labeled as shyness. I struggled socially quite badly. And I was in a constant state of fatigue, both mentally and physically, which was ignored. I was in constant physical pain in my joints, which was sort of looked at briefly, diagnosed as growing pains, which never went away, and that was ignored. And I had an inability to do sports due to my hypermobile joints, and I struggled with spatial awareness with no diagnosis or support. And this was both ignored and mocked by my peers and my teachers at school. So as I moved into young adulthood and later adulthood, I continued to struggle severely with fatigue, both mental and physical. And this was ignored by numerous doctors that I went to see. So I, for a very long time, just stopped seeing doctors. I struggled with physical pain in multiple locations. Each one would be seen by a doctor and a few tests, which seemed to come out as normal, and then ignored. And I think this was in part because I looked quite healthy. I had, quite good healthy skin, sporty appearance, and flexible joints. But I was suffering with poor physical health. I had IBS, interstitial cystitis, asthma, chronic bronchitis, low blood pressure, and more. And these things were all treated in isolation, if they were treated at all. And so I observed the behaviors around me to socially learn from others and mask pain and try to blend in, which just compounded upon my fatigue levels because it was mentally exhausting trying to keep up. In my 30s, we decided that we wanted to have a family, my husband and I. And so we struggled a bit. But this didn't seem completely abnormal for someone in their late 30s with a busy London life and job. And I was very fortunate to live near King's College Assisted Conception Unit, who were able to help us. And on our first IVF try, I got pregnant. It was a good pregnancy, but I had a very traumatic birth, which was considered quite risky to both myself and the child. She got stuck and I had nearly 3 days of labor in the hospital. And then after the birth, what was labeled as baby brain was worse than what my peers were experiencing. And it never really went away. The fatigue just became unbearably worse. And while I always considered myself quite an academic person before, I just, since having my daughter, I've just very much struggled to concentrate and focus anymore. And this is 8 years on now. The physical pain and subluxations continued, and they worsened substantially after birth, and continue to. And by the age of 40, I was unable to leave my bed most days, and I had to leave my part-time employment as my disability worsened. So I did my own research and sought a hypermobile type EDS diagnosis, which I was very quickly given when I was referred to a rheumatologist. Now, my daughter, on the other hand, she was born bright and aware, strong, an early communicator. She learned baby sign language quickly and effectively, as well as babbling and speaking much earlier than her peers did. So I thought, oh, great, all is well with her. She was friendly, a natural extrovert when she was in her sensory friendly environments of home and kindergarten. And this was all she was exposed to for quite a number of years until she was about 6.5. And when we moved her into a new school environment, which was crowded, chaotic, with background noise, fluorescent lights, loud buzzers, sitting for long hours, rules she didn't understand, which didn't seem logical to her, she started to struggle. And she couldn't handle the noise, the overstimulation, the harsh lighting, and the busy environment. And it became quickly apparent that she was socially and emotionally less mature than her peers, which continues to this day. So my daughter has hypermobility, and it's often undiagnosed because it tends to very often be multi-generational. My daughter had always been extremely hypermobile, but because it was normal for those in our family, myself, my mother, my grandmother, this was our norm. And we hadn't realized that pain and bendiness and dislocations and frequent falls weren't normal for everybody, because we'd had so many generations of that. So my daughter, for instance, she was always escaping from her little 5-point locked car seat. I'd clip her in here and get onto the motorway, and then she'd semi-dislocate each arm and crawl out of her little you know, first stage car seat and be woo in the back of the car. And I talked to many other parents about it, and they said, oh, well, you obviously don't have a safe enough car seat. But it was the safest 5-point locked car seat I could get. And of course, I now realize she was semi-dislocating her joints in the way that other babies might not have been able to. Her symptoms can change from day to day. She's naturally quite a physically active and sporty child, but she also experiences pain and subluxations as well as fatigue. And her symptoms are quite global in nature. It isn't just about the joints, hypermobility. I think people put a lot of focus on joints, but there's food reactions, there's contact allergies, there's bladder issues for my daughter, stomach pain. The range of symptoms can be quite broad. These are the ones that affect her the most. And when she was 5 years old, we were in Canada for an extended period of time during COVID, and I took her to a pediatrician on another matter. And while we were there, the pediatrician noticed her hypermobility, and she was given a hypermobile EDS diagnosis. Now, I do need to say that since then, the diagnostic criteria has changed. And if you do pursue any type of hypermobility diagnosis with your child up to the age of 18, it is going to be a different diagnosis that you receive. But they may well receive a HEDS diagnosis or other type of symptomatic hypermobility diagnosis in adulthood. And in terms of the neurodivergence, it's very obvious to myself and now to my husband, but it's been a struggle to get diagnosis and support. And as I'm sure many of you can appreciate, there is a lack of joined up assessment locally and a lack of timely assessment locally. I've found that there's an EDS school toolkit. It's still called that. I imagine the name will change in due course, which is a helpful tool to take into schools. And this covers both physical and sensory issues. So if you don't have a hypermobility diagnosis, or you don't have a neurodivergence diagnosis, it still helps the SENCOs and teachers, etc., to understand the links between the two. So eventually, we had to move schools with my daughter because she was struggling. I just have some tips here, some links on the toolkit and recent research and education, which Jane will go into, and the diagnostic criteria, which is all good things to familiarize yourself with. And some of my tips are that you're the expert on your child. Most symptomatically hypermobile children will be able to enjoy many aspects of a normal childhood. This isn't always the case, but I think it's probably mostly the case. So you can push them to enjoy and explore life where necessary, and you will need to create protective boundaries where necessary as well. And this can be a daily struggle to balance as a parent. And I think probably many of you will understand that with neurodivergence as well. It's just this is taking into consideration physical symptoms as well. And I should say that any type of symptomatic hypermobility diagnosis may prove difficult to obtain until adulthood. So you may find yourself in a constant struggle to be heard in medical, educational, and social environments. So get used to repeating yourself. You will be your child's advocate for many years to come. And this one's a bit controversial, but you also get to decide how much they know about their condition and when they know it. In my child's case, I like to encourage her to engage in sports and physical activities and play and not be afraid of it, not be afraid of dislocating, even though it may occasionally happen. And that may change further down the road, but ultimately that's my decision as a parent, how much she knows about her condition at this point. And the other thing is your co-parent might not see it, all the signs and symptoms that are so obvious to you. And this may well be for a good reason. As I mentioned, the multi-generational factor. In our family, we have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnoses actually on both sides of the family, and neurodivergence on both sides of the family. So it is very normal for everyone in our family to experience these things, which is probably why it wasn't as apparent at first. It's good to observe changes. Interoception and or communication issues can make it really difficult to get clear feedback from your child on how they're feeling. So visual cues, sleep, movement and activity, food and eating behaviors, observe any changes and make adaptations where necessary, as often as necessary, because they may be having physical reactions to things that they're just not able to communicate very effectively, and you'll need to watch and advocate for them. Community is really important. So join a community like SEDS Connective. We're unique. We provide education, community, signposting, and we understand the relationship between hypermobility conditions and neurodivergence, which you will not get elsewhere. You can join at sedsconnective.org, and we have a private Facebook community where you can chat with like-minded people. There's parents, there's adults. And I actually run a monthly support group here in Brighton and Hove at the library, which anyone is welcome to join. Self-care. This is easier said than done. It's probably something we've all heard a million times, but for many reasons, emotionally, financially, geographically, it can be difficult. But do try to carve out something or some time for yourself, which brings you a little bit of joy. And that can be difficult when you have neurodivergent and physically disabled child or children that take a lot of time to care for. But it is important. So what's next? There is currently no care pathway for EDS, HSD, other symptomatic hypermobility conditions. So our physical symptoms are largely managed by ourselves in our family. I'm the driving force. I'm often left feeling tolerated at best as an overbearing or interfering mother by medical, educational, and in social situations as well. Having a happy and normal childhood for us is a bit of a theater production. It requires a lot of behind the scenes juggling and sacrifice on my part, and I almost have to act as an external nervous system for my daughter, buffering the information that comes in and out to try to make life less scary and stressful for her, and physically demanding as well. And at the end of it, I'm just left questioning my every decision without adequate neurodivergence support and a lack of neurodivergence diagnosis, while the symptoms continue to pile up. And we're wondering, you know, when will we receive a diagnosis, and will we even get support after that? And we're just left wondering what's next for us. So thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to hand over to Jane to do her main talk now. I just thought I'd mention, just in case people don't know what EDS is, it's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm sure Jane's going to talk about it a bit more. And another common term that's used is interoception, which is that ability to sense how you're feeling inside: hunger, thirst, pain. Okay, Jane, over to you, I think.
Thank you. So you're absolutely right. There are lots of names and acronyms being used. We use symptomatic hypermobility because, as you've known, a lot of people might know EDS as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it's extremely rare to get this. There are 12 types, but the most common, probably about 85%, is hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos, and it's very closely related to hypermobility spectrum disorders, of which there are 4 types. But the names for children and young people have changed this year again. And so I'll come into that in a minute. But I just wanted you to know that whatever we're talking about, this is what we're talking about. It's more than flexible joints. It's more than doing tricks with your bones. Actually, we become more stiff as we become older. So it's a sort of oxymoron, I think they call it. It can be advantageous. It's not always like, I've got this, my life is doomed. It can be really advantageous in sport and all sorts of things: musicians, gym, dance, also creativity. 1 in 5 children and young people are hypermobile. You can be hypermobile and not have any problem. It's when you're symptomatic. So this is one of our graphics, and we put them out on education and various other parts, and also on our website. This is the one for children and young people. We have one for adults, and we know there's quite a difference in these issues. But this is often seen as, in school or elsewhere, as dizziness, tiredness. They always seem tired. There's a reason for that. They have a lot of anxiety. They have eating disorders, palpitations, they're anxious. They have toileting issues, bowel, bladder. They say they can't eat. They obviously are anxious. They seem very clumsy. They have really poor coordination. Sometimes they seem really good at gym, and other times they're always dropping things, bumping into doors. They seem to have a lot of bruises. They come out of nowhere, or they never seem to bruise at all. So we're going to look into this very quickly. By the way, this is a really, really quick overview. I can do this talk. It can take 3 hours or 3 days. So this is a really, really quick snapshot. And you've heard our wonderful trustee Kelly already talk about her issues and what she's seen. And, you know, it is just amazing. So this is the adult one, which I won't go into now. You can look at it later. But you will see here, we've got autism, dyspraxia, ADHD, and Tourette's at the bottom. So we're called SEDS Connective for a reason. And if you think about what is connective tissue, you've heard of collagen. They are complex connective tissue disorders. They're heritable. And connective tissue is found throughout our body. Through the joints, through autonomic nervous system, some muscles and cartilage, some bones, some blood vessels, and interestingly, in the fat cells around the stomach. It can be passed on, and it goes into genetics a little bit there. But increasingly, for the most common type, which, as we've said already, is hypermobile type, or HSD, or joint hypermobility, there is no genetic test. It's done on clinical assessment. And so if you think about it, when you're building a house and you have the right proportion of sand and water, I think, I'm not a builder, sand, water and cement, you have to get the right proportions for the house. Now, say another builder comes along and uses a different proportion that day for the other side, or too much water, you're going to get a really crooked house. And then you add in the water and electrics. Well, it's going to be very crooked. Then you add in all the furniture, and then you've got all the temperature differences during the year. It's going to be a boom. So this is a very simple analogy of what can happen when we find this in our body, it's a bit like our connective tissue is a glue that is unstable and weak. It's weak in the body. I've got quite a famous quote now. The strength in my brain, which I'll talk about later, is my creativity, I believe, but the weakness is my body. So yeah, interoception is an inner sense, and I've done quite a lot of work on this in a way, and studies and various bits and pieces. So all the time I was training, we know that children seem to come out with pain out of the blue. They were fine before, but suddenly they're in pain. They must be overreacting. It must be a sensory thing. No, it's actually that they've become aware of it. Same with hunger and thirst. I still don't know, and I'm quite old, if I'm hungry or thirsty. Breathing. Are you breathing really shallowly? Are you in pain, for example? And heart, you don't know if your heart's really working and pounding. Do you know if you need to go to the toilet, and so on? And particularly tired, you don't know if you're tired or not until your eyes are actually dropping. So this is a sort of quite a well-known graphic of interoception. There's more you can read about that. I want to talk about dysautonomia. Don't worry about the name, but you will find a lot of children, particularly at secondary age, seem to become dizzy. They might become brain fogged. And a lot of people put this down to being autistic and ADHD, but actually there might be a physical reason for this. So, and this is to do with the autonomic nervous system. I've said the connective tissue is affected there. So let's show the next slide. Let's see if that works. So there's something called, in a subset of dysautonomia, called postural tachycardia syndrome. And it's very, if you're lying down and you go to sitting up, because of the vascular system, the lymphatic system as well, it's very hard for the blood to get up to the brain. And so it starts, the heart has to work harder to pump the blood up. And then, I don't think it's going to work on this one. We've got a graphic. Oh yeah, there we go. We do like our graphics here. And as you stand up, it even goes further down. So you often see the legs are pooling with blood. They change color. It can happen in different temperatures. So it's not just position-wise, it can be temperature as well, and various other things. And what happens is you're not getting the oxygen to the brain. So particularly in schools, you know, you've got this really bright academic child, but suddenly the brain fog, they can't think. And we all get that, and there's a reason for it. And so it's abnormal blood flow within the body. And sometimes they can actually faint, but sometimes you just feel really, really dizzy. You can also feel shaky. You can also feel weak. And because your heart is pounding so hard, or the child's heart is pounding so hard, it actually looks like anxiety. Let me move on. And this is a disorder of the autonomic nervous system. And so often, I think this will go, you will find they might not be falling down, but they will be really dizzy, or they might have to sit up with their legs up. So that's one part of hypermobility. This is a sort of diagram of the key aspects, which I'm going to talk about in the next one. But we've put these graphics together for a reason. We don't have all the evidence base for them, so that's why some of these are in bigger type at the top. But it's likely that the connective tissue is the sort of mediator for all of this, the hypermobility between neurodivergence, orthostatic tachycardia, and dyspraxia. This is SEDS Connective. We present in Europe and globally, actually, and we did a poster for this, and this is what we do. But I'm going to move on because I know we're short of time, so you can come back to look for that. But we do advocate in education strongly. Lots of publications. There's one that came out yesterday for education staff, actually neurodivergent staff in Schools Week. And I did a radio talk last night. And we're always, you know, trying to advocate there because it's been my passion, which you'll see why. We advocate in health, obviously. We sit on large organisations and guidances. We advocate in social care, which is just as important as health. And transport accessibility. We worked at Gatwick and Heathrow, where we can. And also employment is absolutely key. So my story, I moved to 6 different schools before the age of 10. And so I didn't have a really good building blocks in numeracy and literacy. And then I went to a secondary school in England. It was a rather poor school. I was bottom-setted. I was considered dim. I couldn't do handwriting very well. I couldn't do math at all. I did like 2 subjects only. And it was a huge school, even in those days. I was considered dim. And I was considered a hypochondriac. I remember having a lot of migraine, a lot of what is now IBS, or we think MCAS, which I will talk about. And people were quite mean to me, you know, because I'd be really bloated after trying to eat lunch. I'd be hiding in the library or with the pets in the pet corner, and I could eat crisps, but that was about it. Interestingly, I've just done a school dinner survey for a researcher. So I had lots of issues, and I thought, what is the point of me being there? Because I was hardly ever there. I was ill, or I wasn't there at all. So I thought I knew I was different, but I didn't know why. And then I sort of meandered through life and the world, which I could travel then, just sort of backpacking, which was much easier in those days. I think it is now. And then I married, I had children. My eldest was very, very ill, and at birth, very difficult birth, which is, I've just done a maternity meeting yesterday, which is something I want to get into. And couldn't eat, very allergic. Both children are very allergic, and eczema is a very key indicator here. And we kept being excluded even from play school. So I wanted to do something about that, but it was very difficult. I didn't know what, because I was called the refrigerator mother. That comes out quite a lot from all our members, especially of an older generation. So I knew they were going to go to a village school, and I knew they'd need support, my eldest. So I got what was called a statement of SEN then, is now EHCP. And I did it all by myself, no support in those days. And I thought, gosh, I'm not that stupid, you know, I can do this. Maybe the teachers kept asking me for help. They kept coming to me, and I didn't know the answer. I actually invented social stories. I didn't realize that Carol Gray had done it before me, but I invented it. It's like something we often do, because that's what my child needed. I invented all sorts of things. A lot of them had been invented before, but I sort of knew where to go. Touch typing, age 4.5. I mean, that's crazy, but no one else did it in those days. But I knew they couldn't use a pen ever, and it was getting quite stressful. So I was there at school a lot of the time teaching, and I thought, well, as I'm there, I might as well become a teaching assistant. And I decided to become an educational psychologist because I was fed up with being accused of being a bad parent. I started being a TA at secondary as well. I did my psychology degree with the Open University, which is I've done 3 degrees with them. And I realized again, I was almost definitely autistic, but I wasn't allowed to be. I won awards. The doctorate in education changed. So, and I was very, very ill at that point. I had lots of operations. I'm taking this as granted that you kind of know I've been ill throughout my life with operations. But I just wasn't believed, and we didn't have social media. So I just sort of carry on. And I became a special needs teacher at an epilepsy and autism school just over the border in Surrey. which was fantastic for 2 years. And then I was a local advisory teacher for West Sussex for a couple of years until redundancies came in 2010. And I'm not very good at consultations. I don't understand how they work, because I do a really good job, I think, when I'm working, so it should be obvious, and obviously it's not, because you're meant to do all those politics and things. But I also became a steer and leader for the Autism Education Trust that became national, and that did very well. And I became the assistant head teacher at National Autistic Society. And so that carried on, but despite all this, there was no support. I knew from seeing all the children and my own children, there was something there. There was something missing. I'd seen the autistic children, we would give schedules, we'd give timers, things like that, and social stories. For the ADHD children, they would separate. Oh, they need to run around, they need Terrapans. For the dyspraxic children, oh, they can have the support and the writing support. And I thought, there's something missing here. Why are they all so floppy? Why do they all have trouble with, a lot of them have trouble with seeing and eating and allergies? All these things were mounting up, but we didn't have the science then. And there wasn't a word for this. But I knew there was something there, but I didn't know what. And I also knew, I was called the bendy lady medically. That was on my notes, I've seen them. But no support, nothing at all. I got to the point where the doctor said, I'll be the first bionic woman. I got very, very ill. They were going to redo my knees, knee replacements, and hips and shoulders. She said I'd be her first bionic patient. To this day, I haven't had them. I've had 2 knee ops, but I haven't had them replaced yet. So I had to retire in 2015. I was absolutely crashed out. People call it burnt out due to autism. I don't. I call it, I had to mask my pain. I've masked my pain all my life. And this is what masking is. We are disbelieved. It invalidates our own self-worth. Our fatigue is real. The anxiety isn't all social and emotional and mental. It's also physical. And so I crashed out mentally and physically in 2015. I didn't want to know anything. And I was also very ill. I got my diagnosis of what is now hypermobility EDS, and then autism, both not a surprise to me. So the reason I've got these icons here, I was a night owl. I had to look after my children as a single parent, so I didn't get much sleep until I was very ill, and then I didn't move for nearly 2 years off the sofa. I couldn't even open my eyelids. I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, I've got a fibromyalgia, I've got an IBS diagnosis, but none of them seem to make sense to me. I'm also a bit alternative. I don't like going with the group thinking always, unless it makes sense. Some people have different profiles for that. I'm not particularly shouty, but I do see ways forward for different things, and that's what I go for. And I thought, either I can, not do anything again in this area and let things carry on. But I said, this isn't fair. This isn't fair to me, and it isn't fair to others, and it isn't fair to our children. And I really wanted to do something in education that wasn't being done. So I did work with 2 other charities on the EDS school toolkit. It is out of date, for voluntarily, and SEDS Connective helped publicise that. But it is out of date. But since then, I've written many more publications, which you'll see on our link tree. And the most important thing is the paper that came out this year. This is the most important paper you'll see. So this is the new diagnosis, which is pediatric HSD and pediatric GH. This is on the EDS Society website, which you can have a look at. This one here is a Baton score, and you can, don't do it. I mean, you don't have to do it with your children, but this is what they look at. It's part of the criteria. And it varies in age how many you score, but it is quite quite key. So they're looking at if you can bend your legs to the floor. But we often what we're advising in the paper is triple screening. Actually, if you're ADHD, autistic, screen for all of these. Oh, I've lost my screen again. Hang on, just a moment. I've lost it. I know I've moved it. Yeah. So how much time have I got? Just so I know, this screen keeps moving.
You're doing fine, Jane, okay. Carry on.
This is the paper we brought out this year with our pain advisors. And some of the quotes are sadness and anger, examples of emotional displays for symptoms and subsequent symptomatic distress. For example, when a child and young person joints hurt, they may feel sad or cry. As this pain turns to fatigue, they may feel angry. So what the person sees isn't what they're actually feeling. I don't know if that makes sense. We have different reads of it on our website. So this is the graphic of it. We believe that there's trauma caused by not being believed. The VAS scale, which is the smiley faces 1 to 10, both for children, due to interoception and proprioception and cognitive understanding, and something called alexithymia, knowing, having words for emotions and feelings. These all come into place. So very quickly, I strongly believe it's inequality, it's stereotypical bias. And we learn to mask pain. This is really, I love this firework pain display. I'm working with some pain virtual researchers actually. This is what we should be doing. You know, this is what pain feels like sometimes, but it's very hard to describe. And because I'm sure Kelly's the same, I've been discharged when I've been seriously ill and injured because I didn't display the pain badly enough. But I can get a paper cut and I go, it's really painful. You know, it's really painful. I've got really bad pain. I can't carry on now. I've got a paper cut. So it is a complex issue. When I've done talks and papers, these are some of the quotes we have, which are here. Usually we're told it's all in their head or in our head, and they often don't attend school. So attendance is a key issue here, and the reason is because I'll let you look at these later. PE is always a key here. If you look at emotional-based school avoidance, when you have a child at school and they are fatigued, extremely fatigued, because you're holding your body together, your muscles are going to work harder just by sitting still, you know, holding all our organs together. You can't see it. That induces fatigue. And then you've got stomach issues. When you're in pain, you're inflamed, your body's inflamed, headaches and so on. And these are the key issues that are mentioned in EBSA symptoms. Now, then you add in anxiety, but again, that might be a physical origin. Let's think about this. This has been one of my missions for the last at least 6-7 years. So we have to be aware of that. The other thing is bruising and unexplained injuries. Teachers must safeguard children. It's absolute right, social care as well. But we need to know if there's these sort of issues in the family, because some children can bruise just like that. You know, a whiff of, I don't know, breeze of air or something like that can bruise very quickly, or sprain and dislocate without any preceding trauma. I know I've had this belief as an adult. So it's not to say we all bruise. Some people don't. So you can look at these, and that's a paper coming out. Excuse me. This is the evidence paper from our patron, Dr. Eccles, which shows that neurodivergent people are more than 2 times likely to be hypermobile and therefore experience much more pain than the general population. Also more what we call dysautonomia, dizziness and so on. So there's lots coming out there, and we've got a webinar on that as well. I think I've done that one. Yeah. So the paper is out there, it's open access, you can have a look at it. On our website, it's on there as an early read, and we have other publications as well. Interestingly, as I said, I was just on another teaching radio station last night talking about this, and they were saying, we don't know, if the child or student doesn't want to stand out differently or want supports or strategies, what do we do? And that was a really good question, actually. So if neurodivergent, think vice versa, and so on. And these are the recommendations from the paper. Here's some more quotes. We've done an all about me profile, and we have alert cards and so on. I think it's very important you get the student voice in. So often we say they've got this and that. Like Kelly said, she's making the decision, which is her right at the moment, because you don't want it doom laden, don't do anything. Do not wrap them up in cotton wool. We all want to do that. But, these children excel. In fact, they need to know knowledge and understanding is key. That's what we do. We are, by the way, voluntary. We don't get paid. All the money we get paid for goes straight to the our charity. We're doing this because we've been left out of everything for so long. And some people lose their lives. I was lucky not to. This one quote at the top was very interesting. I did it for Chartered College, and I had 350 professionals there, and one of them said, I, like myself, was an advisory teacher working with neurodivergent children for 17 years. She'd met hundreds, worked with hundreds and hundreds of students, and only about 3 had ever had an EDS diagnosis. And I said, yeah, that's probably about right. It's really hard to get, and even now you won't get it. And she said, but everything you've said, and I could see the light bulb going on. She said, everything you said, they've had all these issues. We put it down to being, autistic or burning out or the environment. And it's changed, she's completely changed. And so it's quite overpowering seeing this. And also that hopefully our children and young people won't be as traumatized as the adults we have in our groups being ignored in this. And there's a lot of responsibility for us. When I brought out the toolkit, I had a huge bags of correspondence. I don't even have admin at the moment. I'm afraid a lot goes missing, but we're trying our best. But I would have messages from all around the world saying, at last my child will be understood and accepted. And I'm going, well, actually, no, it's a long way to go still. I think there are a lot of barriers for some reason. But hopefully in the future, and with more research and more training, we will get there. So there we are with the emotional-based school avoidance. Those are the key ones I've already mentioned. People with hypermobility syndrome are overrepresented with anxiety in the population, and that can be associated with this autonomic nervous system abnormality, if you like. And that comes from the research. And neurodivergence also increases the likelihood of clinical anxiety and depression. So the mechanisms between them all are quite key. This is a poster we did for a really school network, which will be coming out, and so schools can put them in the classroom soon. So they do some tips and things, what they are and what to do. And we call it Brave, because we think we are brave, really, and going and understanding it. And so I've been on Inside Health at Radio 4, various other bits and pieces with our patron. Our link tree's there if you want to see our publications. School Suite just came out. I don't know which one that is. There's one for pupils and there's one for staff there. We have press releases and various things needed. It's not all education. I do things on employment. I've got things on how to do exit interviews for neurodivergent people as well. So they all vary. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jane. That was very interesting. I just wanted to start things off by asking that poster that you had called Brave that you just mentioned. Where is that available? How could parents get that to bring into their schools?
It's going to be on the TES web shop, and we are revamping the website at the moment, so it will be linked up there probably within the next we've got Christmas coming up, haven't we? Let's say the week after Christmas, we hope to have everything up there. We've got lots of other cards too. We also have alert cards, which we did in COVID as the first lockdown, that won national awards and put on the Department of Health and Social Care. And these are very key because we have so many issues. We don't like prescribing things. You might hear this coming through as a theme. It's very much the personal journey and voice. So we co-produce things where we can. And so these cards, if you like, can be downloaded. We do it for free. And you can put in what is flaring at that time for your child, or as a carer, or for yourself. So rather than say, I've got heads and I've got this, we all flare. I can have something one day, but it's not relevant the next week. I can look perfectly fit and walking along the pavement, or have 2 legs and splints and be in a wheelchair again. So, or particular stomach issues, or something else happening. So that's why we quite like that.
So Jane's mentioned that Brave poster will be available from the TES shop. That's the Times Educational Supplement shop. So I guess you could direct your school to it, or possibly, I don't know if people can buy it directly from the TES shop,
or our website, yeah.
And in time it'll be available from the website as well. So it's really good, I think, for parents to have tools that they can bring into the school, because, you know, this although it might be quite new to some of our parents, it may be completely new to the schools. So the more tools we can have. And you mentioned previously, Jane, that there was a toolkit on your website too for schools, I believe.
No, it's not owned by us. I did it for 2 other charities. It's rather old now, so it's not so relevant. The paper is very relevant and easy read, and the other publications on TES and so on. Some of the other resources might be useful, the diagrams for children, and we have a lot of graphics on our social media. As I said, we're just revamping the website as we can, being that we're all voluntary, and we all get ill. It's quite a feat, actually. It's quite a feat. Well, actually, I have to say SEDS Connective is quite a feat. Let's beef it up. You know, it started from nothing, and we now have a global reach with 12,000 members. So we are making a difference, I think. But it's all ages, and I'm very aware that old people also have these issues. Maybe I've never thought about it. It might have been put down to arthritis, which we get, by the way. Don't get me wrong, we do get arthritis because of injuries, and or something else, and a lot of autoimmune crosses like endometriosis, thyroid, lupus, Sjogren's, Crohn's, celiac, IBD. There are a lot of crossovers. We don't know why.
Just wherever there's connective tissue, I think
got the research.
The message I'm getting is that wherever there's connective tissue, have a think, could it be this instead, and not just dismiss things that are part of autism or part of ADHD.
Yeah. If you think about your children, do they have teeth issues? Do they have gum issues? Do they have eye issues? Hearing issues? Do they get headaches a lot? Do they have trouble swallowing? swallowing. It's often put down to dyspraxia, oral dyspraxia. Actually, this is hypermobility. It's weak being able to swallow and so on, and you can get reflux. It's a whole gastrointestinal tract is affected very strongly, but it's also an interaction with the neurodivergence, because mental anxiety can also affect that as well. So you've got that Brighton score, which I can bring up, but I don't know your age. I'm not going to ask, but usually children are hypermobile. If you look at babies, they can put their legs above their head very easily. But let me just see if I can share this one again. If you look at this Brighton score again, the knees would be the number 3. It's not the greatest picture there. What they're showing there is the knee is actually, it's almost like bending backwards, like a bow knee. So when you're standing, you hyperextend. So you can touch the floor with straight legs as well. And so that and the knee. And then you've got the fingers, which can go, like my eldest can flip right back to the wrist, no problem. There's a lot of other things there. It's called extensibility of the skin. That doesn't mean you're stretchy everywhere. There's a particular area on the top of the hand they look for. For the most common type, this is hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos, hypermobility spectrum disorder. There are 12 other types that are very rare, and they might have different stretchiness types and have scarring, like cigarette scarring. But what's very common, some of the other symptoms, and Kelly might come in here, but we have stretch marks without, you might get them as a teenager, being very thin and not being pregnant. You can still get stretch marks for no reason. And that's because of the collagen weakness. You can get, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, Kelly, at this point, things on your heel. You can get a lot of foot issues. You can get a lot of allergies. So when we're talking about irritable bowel syndrome, we're talking about something called mast cell activation disorder. Very unlikely to get a diagnosis. But with your question, how to get a diagnosis, you would get usually a referral to a rheumatologist. You would take a history, your family history, your medical history, and have a look at the criteria on the EDS Society. It's quite strict. You might get HSD, and that is in no way a bad thing to have. We think they're very, very common. And it might be at that time you haven't got hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos, you might have HSD. But the support and management should be the same. Sadly, it's not, and this is why I founded SEDS Connective, basically, because I felt it seemed to be a dead end. Luckily, I've just had a very long letter about 2 weeks ago from the Secretary of State, Department for Education, the Right Honourable MP Higgin, that's her name. And so hopefully she's aware of our work now, which she has been for a while, and things will be changing. And I've been co-chair on the Oliver McGann Strategic Oversight Group, and we sit with NICE as a VCSE. So we're hoping, as a voluntary group, we believe very much in a user-led voice, a community voice being as strong as other voices. And we're very passionate about this. Obviously, we do have a passion. So you might get a diagnosis, but you will probably be discharged. I don't want to defeat you right now. I remember that feeling when I was discharged. It wasn't very pleasant. So I want you to know that. But if you have a particular issue, the rheumatologist might refer you to a specialist. This is what I'm saying on the NHS at the moment. There's a long waiting list for rheumatologists. Not all of them understand at the moment symptomatic hypermobility. And this is for an adult. For children, as I said, it's a pediatrician who will do that. And yeah, so some people have crossovers with autoimmune things, so they might need further blood tests, or they might take blood test if you've got specific issues that might be a very rare type, like classical Ehlers-Danlos, or vascular is very serious, you know, for aneurysms. So that might be key. Has anyone got any advice or experience of successful treatments for connective tissue problems affecting gums, swallowing, dysautonomia? What about swallowing and gums? Do you want to do that one? Or dysautonomia? I think you can take your pick.
Dysautonomia, probably. I have less experience with the swallowing and gums issue.
Okay.
Sorry, and what was the question about dysautonomia? Just
have you got any advice or experience of successful treatments?
I mean, unless you need a more strong medication, like I think midodrine is what they can sometimes give you. It has to be from a hospital dispensary, so you'd have to be in a POTS clinic or dysautonomia clinic. But I think most people successfully treat most of their dysautonomia symptoms with just having a little bit higher salt in their diet. So you want to probably see if you can get an electrolytes test from your doctor, just so you know what your baseline is, and whether that's going to positively or negatively influence your blood pressure. But if you know you've got low blood pressure, salt is a really good one. You can buy little packets and bags of electrolyte tablets as well, which some people really prefer. You can just pop it in your bottle of water, or you can just you know, take them orally and have some water with them. Increasing your water as well will help raise your blood pressure a bit. That's all I can think of for the moment, but those two things seem to really help.
I would also add, sometimes we can feel hypoglycemic, so really like crashing, as well as the electrolytes. If you haven't got anything to hand, just going to get a bag of crisps or a Coke, it's what you need if you haven't got any with you. I think most of us have learned to put some emergency stuff in our bags when we move around now, but occasionally I forget, and I'm caught out, and I've forgotten because of the interoception and so on. I've forgotten to eat and drink properly, so that's why sorry.
Thing I would totally second that. It sounds incredibly unhealthy. And I am generally really healthy eater, but if I'm hit and I just know that I physically can't move on, I can't tell whether it's low blood pressure or low blood sugar. I can't read my body that well. And so I get a bag of salted crisps, I get a Diet Coke, and the enough sugar from the potatoes, the salt from the crisps, and the caffeine from the Coke. One of those will do the trick. And it's probably healthier than half the medications that I could be taking alternatively. So I look at it that way. But if you're in a pinch, that can really help you. I totally second that.
When and which library is the Brighton SEDS Connective meetup? I think that's one for Kelly.
Yes, so it's in the Jubilee Library. It's currently on the last Friday of every month from 11 o'clock in the morning until 12:30. We're in the community area, which is a little sort of alcoved area at the very back of the library. You go in, you see the librarian's desk straight ahead of you at the back, and it's just to the left of that. And will be putting out a list of 2024 dates very soon, and maybe there's a way I can share those with Amaze so they can go out with your links. But you don't need to register, you don't need to be a member of SEDS Connective. You can just come along and have a chat, and we can help with signposting, and if you'd like to join, I can help you joining. It's completely free, and it's a really lovely community.
And Kelly, that's not just for parent carers, is it? Because of this multi-generational thing, you can go as your own, in your own right as an individual. It's not necessarily in your role as a parent carer.
Yeah, we have people of all ages. The only thing I'll say is, because it's just me and I'm running the meeting, anyone who brings a small person, you're very welcome to, but I won't have anyone to be able to look after them. So we all have to sort of look after our own small people at the meeting. But
we don't have to guard for that either. So you're responsible for your own children. Interesting. I've got some good news. We haven't made it public yet. Well, we sort of have, but we'll be going public. So Versus Arthritis is one of the largest charities in the UK, and they give out a leaflet when you go to rheumatology or physio people, physiotherapists, sorry, you get a leaflet and they've brought a new thing out about hypermobility on the website, and the new leaflets will be coming out, and we are there now. So the new one on children and young people, the leaflets aren't out, but they will be coming out. So rheumatologists will be getting something, and our name will be there. We did name SEDS Connective with an S, and I should have started it with an A, because then it would be at the top, and I didn't think about that. But by the way, SEDS stands for Symptomatic Hypermobility, Ehlers-Danlos, Neurodivergence, just in case you didn't know. I don't know if I made that clear.
What information is available or advice on slow eating with HEDS and sensory eating due to neurodivergence?
So I'm jumping in. By the way, I only got my ADHD diagnosis this summer. That wasn't a surprise, but I do get quite excited by these things. So do tell me to shush. And I might have to, I think I've understood the question. Slow eating. Yes, it can be sensory. It can be something called ARFID. It could be what they call oral dyspraxia. It could basically be hypermobility. So it's a combination of things, but it also could be pain. So I'm quite key that when I couldn't eat, and I see a lot of our members do have gastroparesis or reflux or something like that, but they don't have the words to put it into words or what it is or the knowledge, they might just avoid food because it's too painful. But if it's slow eating, it might be more of a mechanical nature. Obviously the sensory sensitivities. I mean, my eldest only ate white food for about 4 years. And I actually introduced the first smoothie back in the 90s. I don't know if anyone, I said I invented things. I did the first smoothie because we didn't have smoothie makers then. They wouldn't eat bread. So I used to get a sieve and a spoon, and I used to boil broccoli and things like that. And then I used to, with a spoon, put it through the sieve, and then I'd mix it up with other stuff. Because they couldn't chew. And that worked quite well. And I think I put fizzy lemonade in because fizzy drinks are very acceptable to us because it's almost it helps us. I hate drinking water. Sorry, Kelly, I really hate drinking water. But if it's got a bit of fizzy or a bit of flavour in it, I mean, of course, I love water. We wouldn't be alive if we didn't have water, but I don't like drinking it. I just find it really wet. And I think a lot of people do. But if it's got a bit of fizz in, I think that's really stimulating for the mouth. Just a thought. Kelly, shall I hand over to you because you might have better thoughts than me?
Yeah, I mean, another potential driver, again, it's one of these things you just have to watch and try to figure it out because they may not be able to articulate properly why they're eating so slow. But another driver can be we have a lot of TMJ issues, and like with myself, just the physical movement of moving my jaw is quite painful, and then therefore it's quite slow, but I often don't realize it's painful until I go, oh,
can you explain TMJ? Just explain TMJ.
Yeah, the what is it?
Temporomandibular
joint.
jaw.
Yeah,
joint.
it's like any other joint that can be a problem with symptomatic hypermobility. That's another one. And we often have people who can dislocate or partially dislocate their jaws quite easily, and that there just could be some extra movement happening in that area, making the process quite slow. I have a slow eater in my house. And I do think it's probably like a little bit of a combination of that and the ADHD and general excitement about the world. And there's much more interesting things to be doing than eating. So, you know, it can be multifactorial as well.
I sat on the NICE guidance for the Immunicap, and this was back nearly 10 years ago now, and it came out then, and I was overwhelmed because my children had severe eczema, to the point my youngest looked like a car crash every morning, covered in blood. I don't want to be too graphic. I mean, people used to stop me when I was wheeling him out and saying, has he been in an accident and so on? And it was just what it was. And it's got better. But what I learned was, and there is a paper out, a couple of papers out there, and I sometimes when you get a feeling about something, it's good to see the research, but it seems to be a key. Atopic dermatitis seems to be very linked. There's not enough research when I say this, so one paper is not enough, but it seems to be very, very linked with things like rhinitis, hay fever, which are very key for us, and pseudo asthma. So a lot of our children, including mine, were diagnosed with asthma and have all these other allergies. And eczema seems to be one of the leading ones, particularly because maybe they're allergic to lactose intolerance. So that comes from very early age. And my children are also direct food allergy to tree nuts, not peanuts, tree nuts. Sadly, well, I'm very lucky to have my youngest still with me. We had two very close calls. So, and I that's why I got involved with NICE. But interestingly, I've also had anaphylactic reactions myself, but not to food, to the environment. And this is due to the mast cell. And it's very unpleasant because the tests, as Kelly said, for something else come back negative. I'm not allergic, so it must be psychosomatic. And it's very complicated, but you just feel you've lost everything there. But so I can get rashes, I can get wheals all over my skin. I can show you horrible pictures, but I'm not going to. And so they look like hives. Have you heard of hives, where the skin can swell up with fluid and you get extreme rashes? And the heat, extreme heat all over the body. Very strange things. People look at me strangely. How can you have that? You haven't done anything, you haven't eaten anything. And so it's a strange situation. But looking at the research with eczema, I'm not saying all children with eczema have these issues, but it seems to be an indicator of something to look at. I don't know if that's enough of an answer for you, because we haven't got the answers yet, but I think it's an interesting path to go down.
Somebody was asking whether people would get together to talk a little bit about supporting each other, about how handling medical teams who only sort of focus on anxiety and tend to infer that parents are carers are fabricating the severity of their child's issues, even though they've had diagnoses of PEDS and ASC. So this parent was looking for other parents to kind of talk together. Is that something that can be done through SEDS as a forum, maybe?
Yes, it can be, just that we're voluntary. So we've got a lot of, in fact, a wonderful FB group admin put this out, what do our members want? And they put down suggestions already for the new year. So definitely, yeah. I think, I'm just trying to remember what you asked for, not being believed and making a mountain out of a molehill. I think also very often, and that's what our paper says, if you're autistic, medical practitioners or health practitioners might say, well, you're autistic, therefore you're anxious. And it's called being diagnostically overshadowed. And I think it's unfair. I think it's just as much bias as any other bias. This just saying it's all mental, because as I said, the brain is joined to the body. I've got a lovely graphic for that. I didn't put it on there. I think what comes up quite a lot, and hopefully the work we're publishing helps, is particularly in schools and elsewhere, is being believed that the parents aren't making it up about their children's health. And this is why there's a lot of sometimes miscommunication and because it seems to come out of the blue, these issues. Oh, they're saying they've got pain now. Oh, they're saying they've got this bruise, or how can they have had that bruise? And do you know what? Interestingly, when I talk to teachers, because I try to talk to everybody, the teachers sometimes are absolutely terrified because they've got a pupil and they've suddenly might have sprained their ankle, and they don't know what to tell the parent because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, and they don't know how it happened. So it's an equal sort of scale on both sides. Everybody needs to know this could happen, because the teacher, this was the PE teacher, he was terrified. And I also think that, as I said, some students really excel and we get a real joy of doing something well or moving. It might be running or something. She did kickboxing, which was not something we probably advise, but he was saying, I'm not sure, she could go far, but I'm not sure if I should stop her occasionally because she never stops training. And I suggested it might be a good idea that there's a talk with the parents and her, just to say what so she can make, she was a teenager, she can make that decision, because there will be a payback. That's why a lot of ballerinas come to us. We've got a lot of ballerinas, not ballerina, ballet dance people and gymnastics, because it's fine. It's good to strengthen. We need the strength in our muscles, and that's what we actively support in SEDS. And we have advisors for that. But when they stop, or when you get a sudden illness or infection or injury even, your body can crash, and we decondition really quickly because of our connective tissue. So we've got quite a lot going against us, but we can also excel in areas too. And that's what I also want to get out. But we do need to know about it, and we need to be believed. As I said, the parents can get very upset if they're not believed, and they know their children. And I get that totally. So I'm sure Kelly does too.
So hopefully you can see this. Some of you will have come through the one of the Amaze services, so you're quite familiar with us. Some of you might have picked it up via social media, some other place. So just to recap what we do, we were set up as a parent carer group by parents themselves many years ago, and these are the 5 different services that we provide currently in East Sussex and Brighton and Hove. So we're from the NDP Family Training and Navigation Service. That's the new for parent carers who are on the neurodevelopmental pathway. So that's, you could be thinking of asking for a referral for some neurodevelopmental condition, or you might be waiting for assessment, or may have been recently assessed, or you may have one diagnosis already for your child, but are now thinking that actually they need an assessment for something else. So what we do is we do a navigation call where we signpost you to services, may be able to offer some advice on home life in particular, things that are happening at home, or send some resources afterwards. And we have a small training program. Our core offer is an introduction to neurodiversity, which is an online workshop, and an insider's guide to ADHD for parents post-diagnosis for newly diagnosed children and young people. There's the face-to-face befriending service. That's emotional support to parent carers via social groups and one-to-one befriending from other parent carers. It's organised by and run by Amaze, but it's powered by trained volunteers. And they've got various different groups, dad's group, sometimes, and different WhatsApp groups if you can't make the coffee mornings. The Send Yes advice line, that's something that every local authority has to provide, and they do it via Amaze in this area, and they offer impartial information advice on education, health and social care, parent carers with special educational needs and disabilities, both for the parent carers and also for young people up to the age of 25 if they would like to speak to an advisor directly. They're all got legal training, and you know, they also have resources on the website. They are very busy, so initially they will probably email you advice, but you know, do get back to them if you don't understand what's emailed to you. There's the benefits service, who run workshops and offer advice on how to claim disability living allowance and personal independent payment. So DLA is for children, and PIP is for 16 plus. And we've also got Amazing Futures, which they've got various different groups. It's for people aged 14 to 25. So you can have a look at our website to have more information on that, or you can contact them and they'll kind of try and line you up with the most appropriate group. But you can also look at the events page to see what's coming up for young people. Amazing Futures is pan disability. It's not specifically neuro. Most of these are pan disability actually. It's only our service which focuses on neurodivergence. So just to let you know what's there if you didn't know already. Other organisations to be aware of. Every local authority has a parent care council of some form. So in East Sussex, it's the ESPCF, and in Brighton Hove, it's the parent care council. And their role is not less to do with support, it's more to do with gathering a parent voice and putting it to commissioners, educators, local authority. You know, they're kind of the people to go to get your voice across in a group way. They have made some powerful changes in some areas. So and if you've got the time, they're always looking for people to join them, and you can go along to their forums just to voice what you need to happen, and they will do their best to get changes made. And every local authority also has a local offer, which is they have to provide an information directory for people with SEND from ages 0 to 25, as well as their parents or carers. So if you look for in your local area, for instance, Brighton Hove local offer, it'll come up equally in East Sussex. And that will list all the services and organisations. You know, you can filter on things usually. So that's the end.
We're always looking for volunteers. If anybody feels strongly about what we said today or wants to get involved, you're more than welcome to send us a message. So I've just put our email there, and our website, which is being revamped at the moment, just saying that again because it's not great. It's okay, it's not great, but it's got some interesting blogs on there, actually, some really interesting blogs, and we'd love to have some parent ones if allowed.
Say before we go, even if you do get a type of symptomatic hypermobility diagnosis, it's not going to be your all access pass to a care pathway and support. It's going to be very disappointing. You will still have to battle every battle individually, as each body system has some sort of event. It will always be treated in isolation, and you will always be reminding them that this is an overall condition. So I just wanted to say that, but it's still important. I'd still encourage you to pursue diagnosis if that's something you feel is an issue. And in the meanwhile, don't be afraid when you're liaising with schools or homeschool co-ops or whoever it is that your child's educated with, to just talk about symptoms, because symptoms are symptoms, and that's important. And I also just wanted to thank Amaze for this platform for us to come and share all our knowledge and information in this area with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you for coming, and thank you for helping us provide this resource that we can put on the website too, and also for sharing your very personal stories. Thank you.